better to talk about the art of bracketology than the man who invented it? He's the godfather of bracketology. I speak, of course, of Joey Brackets. ESPN's great Joe Lunardi joins me. Joe, how are you?
Good morning, Ricky. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Take us back to the beginning. I mean, March Madness now and brackets, it's a huge part of sports culture in America. Take me back to the beginning when you were at the forefront of this thing that has become such a phenomenon.
A lot of people don't know this or would believe it, but I was the star power forward on my high school team at, 5'2", 135. Now, all kidding aside, I was blessed and fortunate enough to go to college in Philadephia at St. Joe's at a time when all of the Philly schools were still playing all of their major games at the Palestra at one venue at the University of Pennsylvania, Villanova, Penn, Temple, St. Joe, and LaSalle. So as a young college kid, I had access to all of those teams and all of those coaches and all of the visiting teams and coaches and media who would come into Philly. Notre Dame every year and Georgetown and Syracuse. And I remember seeing North Carolina and Duke in the Palestra and UCLA. And I mean, you name it, a who's who of college basketball. And I guess now, 40 some years later, I was majoring in college basketball at St. Joe's without really knowing it at the time. And after college, as a young sports writer in the Philly area, most years, if not all years, there were a couple of our local teams that were in the hunt for the tournament. And it's only been in the last 2 or 3 years where Philly has been shut out, due mainly to the way the sports landscape has changed. But point being, back in the 80s and 90s, when I was covering it full time, I needed to know where the local teams were likely to be seeded or how their chances of selection stacked up to other potential at-large teams around the country. So I was kind of doing bracketology without knowing it. And, eventually I crossed paths with the Blue Ribbon Yearbook and then with ESPN, more on the .com side than on the TV side. But apparently the first few times they put me on the air, I didn't screw up badly enough to get excluded from the mix. And, now it's at a point where it's grown every year to new and different levels of exposure. And I'm just thrilled to be a part of it all. And today, once the tournament tips off, my work is essentially done. And I get to be a fan with a remote and a bag of chips and, a grown-up beverage like everybody else. It's fabulous.
All right, Joe, so take me through it. What is the process like? When do you really start to dig in? And what does your season look like as it leads up to the point where you can finally kick back and be a fan like the rest of us?
Well, every night of the season, and this year it started on November 4th, Monday, November 4th, until this past Sunday, March the 16th, when the bracket came out. I have a 1 to 68 ranked seed list of teams, just like the committee will build its final bracket from. I do it every night of the year from the first night of the season until the last. And in those last, few days, a couple weeks or so leading up to the tournament, champ week, etc. Sometimes it's more than once a day, because that's what the public, is demanding in terms of information, and what my own peers at the network are demanding in terms of content. So I'm not suggesting that that's a healthy way for a normal person to spend their time, to make a seed list 1 to 68 every night for 5 months. But that's the job, and I love it. And I'd like to think I take the work of it seriously and hopefully not myself too seriously because at the end of the day, I'm getting paid to watch and to talk about basketball. And who wouldn't sign up for that?
So, what have you seen in terms of the selection process through the many years that you've done this? Do they do a better job today than they used to do? Is it gotten easier to accurately predict through the years? What's the evolution been like as sort of the art form of what you do?
And that is a great and insightful question because it has evolved and the committee has evolved and the things that they deem as important has evolved. And my job is kind of to get inside their heads, if you will, in advance. Maybe some years better than others. Certainly, I didn't, and most people didn't see North Carolina coming this year as an at-large selection, and no matter how many games they win in the tournament, and they could still win plenty more. In fact, I have them in my own bracket, winning a couple more. Uh, I think it was an inexplicable selection based on the committee's own track record over the years. But at the end of the day, those 12 people have a vote and we don't. So I have to abide by what they do and adjust my methods going forward accordingly. I will say this in the last 5 or 6 years, since the advent of the net as the primary metric that the committee uses, I think they have gotten more consistent in terms of both selection and seeding, maybe a little more bureaucratic and a little less likely to go, to deviate from the numbers, if you will. This year threw a bit of a kink into that, but I think it was also probably a one off. So I'm not going to probably change my methods a ton between now and next season, but we got a few months to figure that out. And I try and take a few days off from it at the moment. And instead of complaining, which just makes me look like the cranky old guy, um, just enjoy the madness. Because no matter who makes it in that last spot or next to last spot, uh, the tournament itself is generally idiot proof because we have 67 games and we can't help but have storylines and buzzer beaters and underdogs and Sister Jean and all that that makes it, the spectacle that it is. It's the most unpredictable yet satisfying championship that we have. And, I love the World Series. I love the Super Bowl. I love all that. But, for the most part, it's one day, two teams, one game. And here we have, 67 games in a mini series over 3 weeks. And it captivates even the most casual sports fans out there. I mean, literally, right before I came on with you guys, my wife handed me her bracket and said, would you log in and put this on for me? I don't know how to do it. But, she wants to watch the games just like the hardcore people. And if this year repeats itself like most others, I will lose the family pool to someone who's watched, 5 games all year. Maybe. I mean, one year I lost to a Cocker Spaniel.
That's the great thing about it, right? Everybody who has a pen and a piece of paper has
Yes.
a shot when
Yeah,
it
and I
comes
mean,
down to it.
I got rid of the Cocker Spaniel, but that just kidding. I don't want the PETA folks coming after me. He's
So,
back in the
Joe, let me
pool.
ask you.
He picks the dog teams. This year, the dog has 3 bulldogs and a terrier in the final four.
There you go. Well, there you go. That's a bold move there coming from the
A bold
dog.
move. He's better off when UConn wins and he takes the Huskies.
Joe, where did you have North Carolina, by the way? It rated
I had
yourself.
North Carolina at team number 71, so 3 teams out
Okay.
of the field. And I like North Carolina. I'm a fan. Uh, but I will go to my grave saying that uh, if it was virtually any other school with a 1-12 record in Quad One, we would not be having the conversation. If it was North Dakota, North Texas, North Alabama, North Manitoba, um, it was a disqualifying resume in my view. It doesn't have anything to
Joe,
do with how well they play now, but at some point there's a level of earning your spot. And I would argue that they did not.
it's so serious now. I mean, obviously
Oh,
fans take it seriously. We saw the governor of West Virginia the other day
yeah.
at a
Yeah.
press conference say that he wants to get his attorney general involved
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
discussing this. And setting
I
that
would say
aside for a second,
the only thing dumber than the committee's decision was the governor of West Virginia. Because if I was a taxpayer in West Virginia, I would say, seriously? That's what you're worried about? But that's, I don't want to start up political.
Well, we're in agreement. We're in agreement there. But let me
Come
ask
on.
you, because you're the best guy to ask. Did West Virginia deserve to be in your opinion?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right.
Yes. Yes.
Let me bring in my sidekick here, Ronnie T-shirts. He's one of the biggest college sports fans that I know. Bigger college basketball fan than me, probably. Ronnie, where are you? Jump in here.
Hey, Joe.
I love the
We got
site,
Joey
by the way.
Brackets right here on the program. Let's go.
The Super 70s account is I'm a huge fan because those were my formative years in sports.
Thank you so much, Joe. Appreciate that.
So,
Ronnie, you've got the Godfather right here.
Hey, let's
go
since
for it.
you brought up formative years, so let's talk about 44 years ago. It was a crazy day. March 14th, 1981.
I was in the building.
Well, let me set it up, Joe.
Building.
Joe, let me set it up. U.S. Reed hit a half-court shot to beat Louisville, and then seconds later, Ronaldo Blackman hit a buzzer beater to beat Oregon State, and then your alma mater did something. Talk to me about what it was like to be a student at St. Joe's during that crazy magical run that they had in 1981.
And thank you for asking and for actually remembering. Yes, the number one overall seed that year for the second year in a row was DePaul. They were undefeated. It was a second round game at the University of Dayton Arena, same place where the first four just concluded. In those days, it was a 48-team field, so the top four in each region didn't play a first-round game. So we, St. Joe's, I was a junior in college, we're in the 8-9 game for a right to play the number one team in the country. Mark Aguirre, Terry Cummings, they were pretty good. We won a 1-point game as the 9 seed over Creighton to advance Saturday afternoon, and pre-shot clock, pre-3-pointer. St. Joe's played four corners, a lot of stall. Why Ray Meyer didn't press is a question unanswered to this day. But here's DePaul up 48-47 with 11 seconds to go, putting an 89% free throw shooter on the line to ice it, and doesn't he miss the front end of a 1-on-1? Skip Dillard and the Hawks come down and make a layup at the buzzer to win 49-48. Mark Aguirre, player of the year, grabs the ball out of the net, walks out of the Dayton Arena, and throws the ball in the Miami River and walks back to the hotel down the street, the Dayton Marriott, which I thought was mostly urban legend until a couple of years ago. I'm at an event, a charity event in Chicago, and isn't Mark Aguirre part of the panel, myself included? And I asked him, I didn't think he was going to hit me at this point, right? And I said, I was in the building that day, and he's like, oh, no, not another St. Joe's guy. And I said, did you really walk out in your uniform and go back to the hotel and chuck the ball off the bridge? And he's like, yep. And they lost as the unbeaten number one overall seed 2 years in a row in that same manner. The year before, it was UCLA that took them out, so at least they could say it was UCLA, right? I love St. Joe's as much as the next guy, but I don't, think we have quite the pedigree of UCLA. And it was really something. And those Hawks went all the way to the Elite Eight, and they were actually a game away from playing in the Final Four, which that year was, oddly enough, in Philadelphia. So St. Joe's was a win away from playing in the Final Four in the Spectrum. Now, it was a huge, heavy lift of a win because the Elite Eight, the regional final, was Indiana at Indiana Assembly Hall. So, like in retrospect, that game was never going to go our way. I'm not, we were good, but I don't know that we had one player who would have started for Indiana. I mean, Isaiah Thomas, Landon Turner, Ray Tolbert. Seriously. And that's not even counting Bobby Knight being a factor. So, it was a time in which I fell in love with the tournament and how the bracket was put together and why was Little St. Joe's the number 9 seed in something that doesn't exist anymore, it was called the Mideast Regional. And it was really that day, that moment, Ron, when my kind of addiction to the bracket, if you will, was born.
That's awesome. Do you remember your reaction when you were in the arena when that?
Oh my God, yes.
Like
whenever, I'm usually
you'll get chills.
Yeah, I'm usually there. Dayton is a team in the Atlantic 10 that St. Joe's still plays, and I still do a lot of radio color work for St. Joe's. And I always take a walk over to where I was on press row that day, because.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I can't imagine what it must have been like, being a student at a Cinderella school and experiencing that, because I just can't imagine what it would have been like.
And I mean, you think about how much bigger the tournament is today, right? And the buzzer beaters that we still talk about. I would say that, I get asked, what's the greatest sporting event? What's the greatest thing you ever saw? And there's that game. There's the Christian Laettner game, which was in Philly in 1992 that I was fortunate enough to be at. And then I would say, this is unrelated, the Bryce Harper pennant-winning home run for the Phillies a couple years ago didn't suck. And then, of course, there was the best 4 hours in the history of Philadelphia sports.
Philly Special?
That was just a month ago in the Super Bowl. So
this last one, okay.
Philly Special was awesome, but this was a 4-hour party.
Yeah, it really was.
I mean, it was 40-6 for heaven's sakes. And in Philly, we don't have a lot of championships to hang our hats on. So we tend to maybe overdo it a bit. And I was certainly, guilty of that on February the 9th.
Joe, tell me a little bit. You grew up in the 70s. And, you were referencing Super 70s, which I certainly appreciate very much, sir. But what were your things back then? Favorite TV shows, bands?
Oh, it's easy.
All that good stuff. Crushes,
things
we all remember.
Yeah, but I would just throw some names at you. Sports names like Mike Schmidt, Steve Carlton, Dr. J, Moses Malone, Bobby Clark, Bernie Perrant, the formative players on the teams of my youth. And Star Wars and getting a driver's license. And I'm a Philly guy, but I actually went to high school, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade in Southern California. So that kind of whole vibe and scene, disco, Saturday Night Fever. Nobody's ever accused me of cutting a rug or anything, but those, and starting college in 1978. Yeah, So I'll give a shout out to Damien High School in Laverne, California, and all the people who mentored me along the way.
What an era in Philadelphia sports as you went through
Not too
those names.
So here you go. The
It's a good time to be a
79-80,
Philadelphia sports fan.
the 79-80 closing the decade, that, kind of academic year, sports year, all 4 Philly teams made the championship round. Of the Eagles lost the Super Bowl to Oakland. The Flyers lost the Stanley Cup final to the Islanders, but set a still to this day record 35 game unbeaten streak. And of course, the Phillies won the World Series over George Brett and Kansas City. The Sixers lost to the Lakers that year, but then got them back a couple years later. So yeah, we were pretty good.
Yeah, you were. You were damn good. Joe, before you get out of here, I don't want to keep you all day. Give me your Final Four prediction and give me at least one Cinderella, if not a couple, that we should keep our eyes on.
I've got, I'm embarrassed to say I have 3 number 1 seeds in my Final Four.
I have 4.
So we know that that's probably not going to happen. And Ron, it's happened one time in
I know.
40,
I know.
Which either you can say you're going to die on that hill or we're really overdue for it to happen again.
Yeah, that's true.
But I have Duke, Houston, Florida, and a 2 seed Michigan State. And I have Florida over Houston in my final. Double-digit seeds that I think are good enough to win a game or more. I would include Colorado State, VCU, Drake, and I'll really go out on a limb. I think High Point can upset Purdue. This is a Purdue group that in recent years has lost to a 15 in St. Peter's and a 16 in Fairleigh Dickinson. So yeah, we're going to see some drama because we can't help it.
Well, Joe, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming on. An honor to have the man who made bracketology a part of the lexicon on the program today. We'd love to have you back on again sometime for sure.
Indeed. Well, we got a tip in about 6 minutes, so here we go. The ball is tipped.
Let's do it.
Amen. Thanks, fellas.
Thanks, Joe. Bye.
Thank you, Joe. Joey Brackets, the great Joe Lunardi of ESPN. That's fun. Ronnie, what do you think? That was a great question, Ron. You're earning the paycheck today, brother.
Dude, I mean, I was so excited. I actually called Jared and I said, please make sure that I actually do get on because I have an awesome question that I really think Joe's going to like. And man, that just made my day just to see him light up and tell that story. And wow, that was awesome, Ricky.
Look at you doing the research, baby. That's what it is.
But I remember that.
That's why you sat in the co-pilot chair.
I mean, I remember that
U.S. Reed.
Yes.
Beating Louisville. That's the one that I remember growing up in Kentucky.
Yeah, of course you do. Yeah, you probably cried that day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't a Louisville fan. I was all right.
Oh, okay.
I grew up a Kentucky fan. It wasn't until later.
So you cheered. You were going nuts.
Yeah. Oh, I remember it well, man.
I mean, I will always remember. It's
because
funny,
they were the defending champs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but you always remember names, and U.S. Reed might be one of the greatest names in my lifetime of college sports. U.S. Reed, how do you forget it?
Such a great name, bro. One of the great names, all-time, all-name team. U.S. Reed. Can't even make something better than that up. Sounds like a character that Jim Brown would have played in a movie in 1974 that I would have watched. Ron, is what it sounds like.